the precursor to the establishment of today's Israel. So what we just established the fall of the children of Yasharel, right, of the northern tribes. We've established the fall of the kingdom of Judah, the two tribes that were left, right? And the northern tribes got scattered and are scattered to this day. And the tribe of Judah, they got captured into Babylon, right? They went into that Babylon captivity. They got captured in different waves. I think they took 7,000 first of the mighty men. And yes, I have it here in two waves. The first wave, they carried away 7,000 men of valor, including Ezekiel the prophet. They left the poor behind. So they left the poor behind. They left a ruler over them. And then the second wave of captivity again. So it happened in two waves. What we're going to look at now is, so we have established that as Yahuwah had spoken and decreed, because he knew the children of Israel would not obey him and would go and serve pagan Elohims and worship idols, that was the decree that he decreed from them, right? And it got him really angry to allow even his own house to be built. And if any of us understand Elohim that we serve, the Elohim of Yasharel, we would understand how precious that is to him. And for him to allow that to happen, it had to be really, really grave sin. We're going to look at now. Today, we have seen that the nation of Israel is established. But saints, do you know what happened before that nation of Israel was established? Do you know the precursor to the establishment of the nation of Israel? Because of course, for most of us, including myself, before Yahuwah had revealed this to us and embarked on the research, we just knew that Israel was a nation in 1948. It's what's spoken on the news and CNN and everywhere. But many of us may not be aware of, especially when we were brought into the faith, what happened for the nation of Israel to be established. And what happened is something called the Balfour Declaration. And this is what we're going to look at now. This is the precursor to the establishment of the children of Yasharel. So let me just get up the Balfour Declaration for you. So for those of you who have never seen or heard about the Balfour Declaration, let us have a look at the Balfour Declaration really quickly. This is Yahuwah business right now, because I'm telling you, this Yahuwah is very interested in what's going on. And if we say we serve him and love him, we ought to love the things he loves, right? Now, I'm not going to read this whole declaration because you can read it yourself, right? It's on Wikipedia, it's all over the internet. I'm just going to read the letter here that was written to Lord Rothschild on the 2nd of November, 1917. The nation of Israel was actually established in 1948. So this is the precursor to the establishment of the nation of Israel. And I want you to stick with me to the end because we're going to answer the question, was the establishment of the nation of Israel prophecy fulfilled as we've been taught by mainstream Christianity and on the news everywhere, right? Anyway, let me get into this. So, dear Lord Rothschild, I have much pleasure in conveying to you, on behalf of His Majesty's government, right, the following declaration of sympathy with Jewish Zionist aspirations, which has been submitted to and approved by the cabinet, right? So this is the British writing. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine or the rights and political status enjoyed by the Jews in any other country. I should be grateful if you would bring this declaration to the knowledge of the Zionist Federation. So the Balfour Declaration is this public statement, which I've just read, issued by the British government in 1917 during the First World War, announcing its support for the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, right? And then an Ottoman region with a small minority of Jewish population. The declaration was contained in a letter signed by the Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Rothschild, a leader of the British Jewish community. Stick with me, saints, because we're going to go deep here. Stick with me. For transmission to the Zionist Federation of Great Britain and Ireland. The text of the declaration was published in the press on 9th November 1917. So this is the precursor to the establishment of the nation of Yasharel. Where did my slides go? Right? What we're going to look at now. So we see it's a letter that was sent to the Lord Rothschild. I'm going to read from a book. We're going to look at this book called The Synagogue of Satan, which is going to reveal to you, saints, now, following that Balfour Declaration, how was the nation of Israel actually established? Do you know it? Do I know it? Did I know it before this? No, I didn't. So I'm reading from this book. I have the wrong book. This book, I have been looking for this book for years. It's not an occultic book. It's a historical book that reveals the secret history of Jewish world domination, and it tells you when a lot of things happened the year, and it's in historical account. So it starts from the year. Let me see what year it starts from. The year 740 AD, and it gives you an account straight up to the year. Let me see if I can get the last one. Let me see what year is the last one. 2006. And since there are lots of things happening in the world, of course, that we would never know about because they're not putting it on the news. And a lot of times they put it in books. But you know what? Many of us, we don't even have the time to read the books. Or some of us, we are not even trained to read the books. And I wanted to buy this book, my husband and I, for a very long time. And we couldn't get it. Unavailable. Because this book actually, it's a rare book. Until finally we found this book, and they only print 6 a year. So not many people actually get to put their hands on this. And I'm going to read from page 148. And I want to invite you to listen to this. This is what you've not been told. So we read about the Balfour Declaration, right? Now we're going to read about how the nation of Israel came into being and what certain things that is associated with the nation of Israel actually mean before we get into the prophecy aspect. So the Rothschilds took a giant step towards their goal. This was in the year 1945. The Rothschilds take a giant step towards the goal of world domination when their third overt attempt at world government, the Second League of Nations, which is called the United Nations, is approved this year. So we are learning here from this record that the United Nations, who was behind the establishment of the League of Nations, as it's called, the United Nations? It was the Rothschilds that was behind it, right? Now we're going to hop over to a couple more pages, and we're going to look at another record of 1947. So that was 1945. The United Nations was established, the League of Nations, for an attempt at, it is written here, one world government. Next, 1947. The British, who prior to World War II declared that there would be no more immigration of Jews to Palestine in order to protect the Palestinians from the acts of terror against both them and British soldiers, transfer control of Palestine to the United Nations. The United Nations resolves to have Palestine partitioned into 2 states, one Jewish and one Arab, with Jerusalem to remain as an international zone to be enjoyed by all religious faith. This transfer is scheduled to take place on May 15, 1948. However, just to put into perspective who controls the United Nations, please be aware that the United Nations have no right to give Arab property to anyone. The Jews owned only 6% of Palestine at that time, yet the United Nations Resolution 181 granted the Jews 57% of the land, leaving the Arabs, who at that time had 94%, with only 43%. So we see here the role of the United Nations, right, in the distribution of the land. The Rothschilds took a giant step in establishing the United Nations. We see the role of the United Nations now in the distribution of the land. Now, what we're actually going to read now, in 1948, the establishment of Israel. In the spring of this year, the Rothschild bribed President Harry S. Truman, 33rd President of the United States, 1945 to 1953, to recognize Israel as a sovereign state with $2 million, which they give to him on his campaign trail. Saints, pay attention to this. In 1948, the Rothschilds bribe President Harry Truman to recognize Israel as a sovereign state with $2 million, which they gave to him on his campaign trail. At midnight on May 14th, the State of Israel is officially proclaimed in Tel Aviv. 11 minutes later, President Truman declares the United States as the first foreign nation to recognize it. Truman later confides to his friends that he wanted to recognize the Jewish state in the first hour of its birth. Yet, when pressed by journalists on the subject, he refuses to discuss his pro-Jewish stance any further. So here we see, stay with me and listen to this. One, we seen in 1945, the Rothschilds made that move to establish the United Nations, the One World Government, the League of Nations. We see in 1947, we see the United Nations, right, and the role that they played by the resolution of 181 to grant the Jews 57% of the land and the Arabs 43%. And now in 1948, we're seeing here where the Rothschilds bribe President Harry Truman with $2 million to recognize the state of Israel officially. Now, Israel is a nation. Who is behind it? Saints, who is behind it? Yahuwah? Is this prophecy being fulfilled? We're going to answer that question tonight from the scriptures. We're looking at the hand of man right now, but from the scriptures, we are going to answer some really, really serious questions tonight. The flag that everyone sees on the nation of Israel. I remember some years ago when we used to live in Paris, my husband had a chain and it had the same Star of David. And he thought it was Star of David because his name was David. And back then, we all thought it was Star of David because even in mainstream Christianity, Star of David, Star of David. There's no Star of David. If you do your research, now we know better, of course. If you do your research, you would notice that the Star of David is the Star of Rampham, the very same star that the true children of Israel worshipped, they had as an idol, as a symbol, is the Star of Rampham. But nonetheless, let us stick to the topic today. We have the nation of Israel that is established by the hands of the Rothschilds and the United Nations. And there's a star on the flag, and there's a flag of a certain color. You know what? Allow me, if you may, let us pull up the flag. As we talk about it, there's a reason I'm sharing all this, and you will see it in the end. Let us just pull up that flag really quickly. Let me see if I can share my screen. And let me see if I can pull up that flag, right? Now, let's talk. The flag of Israel is also unveiled in that very same year of 1948. I'm reading from the Synagogue of Satan, like I said, and it is not an occultic book. It's a historical book with facts, okay? Now, the emblem on the flag is a blue-colored version of the Rothschild red hexagram. It has a blue border at the top and the bottom, which represents the Nile and Euphrates rivers. Did you know that? I certainly didn't know that. This is put there to make the Jewish territorial ambitions very clear, and Israel in accordance with its biblical borders, biblical in inverted commas. This would, of course, mean the inclusion into Israel of Iraq, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and parts of Saudi Arabia. Now we can see why Netanyahu even fires into Lebanon, right? But we're not getting into all the nitty-gritty now. We're sticking on this topic right now. The use of the Rothschild hexagram is disguised as it is referred to in the Rothschild media as a Star of David. However, it is clear to anyone with knowledge of esoteric symbolism that this hexagram was used in the ancient mystery religions as the symbol of Molech. This is what is on the flag of the children of the nation of Israel right now. It is the symbol of Molech. And for those of you who do not know, those in Israel right now, they follow the Talmud. They don't follow scripture that you and I following. They follow the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud, and Kabbalah teachings. We'll talk about that another day. So the symbol of Molech is described as a demon of unwilling sacrifice, and also, interestingly, the name of the stone owl of the elite worship at Bohemian Grove. We know about that, right, with the presidents of America. And Astaroth. Remember we read about the Asherah poles in 2 Kings 17 when we started this chapter that the children of Israel were putting up, etc. Due to the fact it is made up of 6 lines, has 6 triangular sectors and 6 points, it is commonly regarded as a symbol of Satan. Pause. Many people don't know this. If you have any Star of David in your home, or you wear it on a necklace or on an earring, throw it away. It's the Star of Molech, the Star of Rampham, the symbol of Satan. Interestingly, the hexagram is also used to represent Saturn, which has been identified as the esoteric name for Satan. Would this not indicate that anyone killed in the name of Israel is actually a sacrifice to their god Satan? Anyway, we're going to skip this. So to recap, the hexagram on the Israeli flag represents the number of the beast, 666. So we read about the flag of Israel. We read about how Israel was established. Now, the last thing we're going to read from this book is, we're going to hop over to the year. Just bear with me. We're hopping over to the year January 10th, 1963. And on January 10th, 1963, it's the goals of the Communist Manifesto, and the Rothschilds also have a role in this, was established in the United States. Since you could go Google this, I went and Googled this and double checked this because I wanted to see, well, if the things in this book, of course, some of them you don't find on the internet. Like I said, they want to hide stuff, they put it in the books. But the Communist Manifesto, you can find it out there. I checked it. And I'm not going to read everything because it's 45 goals. But I'm going to read some of the goals right now because you're going to see a correlation with what's happening in the world today. Provide American aid to all nations regardless of communist domination. Promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. Who is promoting the global pandemic treaty? The United Nations. Who is promoting the global citizen? The United Nations. Get control of the schools. Use them as transmission belts for socialism and current communist propaganda. Soften the curriculum. Get control of teachers' associations. Put the party line in textbooks. Aren't you seeing their agenda in the schools now? Yes. Use student riots to foment public protests against programs or organizations which are under a communist attack. And we've seen what the students' riots that were taking place recently in America and in England. Infiltrate the press. Get control of book review assignments, editorial writing, policy making positions. Gain control of key positions on radio, TV, and motion pictures. Control art critics and directors of art museums. Our plan is to promote ugliness, repulsive, meaningless art. Eliminate all laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship. Didn't they took the 10 commandments out of the schools? Didn't they take prayer out of the schools? We have some state in the nation of America right now. I did a video on it. Want to put the 10 commandments back in the schools, and he's being sued right now, right? And they say here is written a violation of free speech and free press. Break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography. How easy it is to access pornography on the internet. Now they're putting pornography in your face, in the musical videos, in the movies. Some of the movies, you literally have to move it when it starts. It's in your face. And obscenity in books, magazines, motion pictures, radio, and TV. Present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. We've seen that today. Infiltrate the churches and replace revealed religion with social religion. How many of the churches now is a social agenda going on in the church? It has changed. Discredit the Bible and emphasize the need for intellectual maturity, which does not need a religious crutch. Hasn't that been happening? Do you know there's a state in America also where they're going to pass a law that you cannot teach certain things from the Bible because it's anti-Semitism? Last one, eliminate prayer or any phase of religion expression in the schools on the ground that it violates the principle of separation of church and state. Saints, if you Google, when you have time, write it down. The 45 goals of the Communist Manifesto stated in the United States Congress by A.S. Hurlong Jr. of Florida, and therefore form the congressional record of that day. Google this. And when you look at the Communist Manifesto, you would see that all that you're seeing in it right now is being played out today. It is being played out today. So now let's look at what we established. We established that the United Nations, right? First, we established in 1945, the Rothschilds took that giant step in establishing the United Nations, right? The United Nations, the League of Nations, as they called it, for the one world government was set up. This is an important foundation I'm setting up here for you to bear this in mind. For the one world government was set up. That happened in 1945. In 1947, that same United Nations that was just established in 1945, 2 years later, that very same United Nations, now what is it doing? It is dividing the land of Israel, right? It divided that land of Israel. And in 1948, we see that very same Rothschild pay Harry Truman, the president of America, $2 million US, and ask him to officially recognize Israel as a nation, which he did within that hour in 1948. The precursor to the establishment of all this was the Balfour Declaration, which we went through in 1917 by the British and the elites who were part of this, and the Europeans who were part of this Balfour Declaration. Let that simmer in your spirit. Meditate on that. And what we're going to look at now, we're going to look at, so was Israel a nation before it was declared one by the United Nations?